Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'm talking with Lauren Thomas, who is a blogger who has a lifestyle blog called Modern Hippie, where she writes about food, lifestyle, fashion, and more. Lauren has a new book called The Modern Hippie Table, and it's her first book. Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, Lauren, for our listeners who may not yet be familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, I'm not a traditional cookbook author, but my cookbook is a lifestyle cookbook. And I guess I'll just start by saying I grew up in a family that was a traditional Jewish family, and there was a lot of cooking and holidays and traditions and hosting. And that really was where my love affair with hosting began. I just paid attention, and I always just loved the whole ambiance that was at my grandparents' house when they hosted parties or gatherings. And I just really paid attention to all that went on with that. And of course, paid attention to the kitchen and didn't realize that it was because I had such a passion for it at the time. I went on to study. I went to an art high school for painting. I was real heavy into visual arts. Realized I didn't want to go to an art school or be an artist for a living. So I went on to study psychology in college.
Oh, nice.
Ended up getting my master's in psychology, and realizing I didn't want to sit behind a desk and see patients all day. Yeah. However, my studies really lended itself to being very aware of how people feel. And that has carried over to my love of hosting and making people, whether it's my family or friends, feel special when they come into my home.
You're very well known for your website, Modern Hippie Table, and it's a really beautiful website that details a lot of different facets of what you're talking about: fashion, entertaining, travel, and food. How did you start writing this? Where did that come in for you?
Yeah, so I have had various blogs too, because I love to write. I love to tell stories through pictures and through writing. And social media, specifically Instagram, is a great vehicle for that, great platform. And I was just sort of telling stories about my life and how we travel in our sometimes in our little camper, or whether we're traveling to Europe. I love sharing that. And I love, and I realized that by telling these stories, whether it was in my travels or in my kitchen, the way that I told them was in a way that showed the process as much as the finished product. And I started to be very aware that people, picked up on this and were intrigued by that process. And people wanted to know not only what I was making, but also, well, how do you manage to make that after you've had a busy day running around? How do you still entertain? So by sharing that process and that growing curiosity on my website, my blog, my social media, I realized that people, there was a real need for, or I guess a draw of this kind of lifestyle. So that's sort of how I started to grow my following, and it was great.
Your website is just gorgeous. You do an amazing job on it. It's just visually stunning.
Thank you.
Yeah, was that organic with you? Did you kind of think about all this before you started it, or did it just kind of all come together for you?
Organic. I think just, knowing now what you know about my background, generally speaking, in the arts and social sciences, there just is a real innate ability within me to recognize that there's such a visual component to what I do, and that I love seeing and following other people with sort of lifestyle blogs and who travel or whatever it is that they do. I don't care if they a flight attendant or a donut shop employee. I'm always really, when people can tell a good story, I'm very intrigued.
Yeah. Now, you talked about the fact that you studied psychology and you're a psychologist. I worked with psychology students as a librarian for 17 years, and I know for a fact that it is one of the toughest things you could possibly do in your life is to be a psychology student. And this for me ties into, you talk about imposter syndrome and chasing your dreams. It's very hard to be a psychologist. And did this kind of tie into that? Because I know that getting through that process of going through all the classes, which are really, really hard. I don't think people really realize how hard psychology is to study. Did this kind of tie into later on writing about imposter syndrome and chasing your dreams? How did that kind of struggle to get through that program? And it is a struggle. Did
Yes.
that kind of led to that other thing?
Yes, it did, very much so, because even though I am so proud of the finished product of this book, I am more passionate about sharing the journey that it took to get there. And I don't mean the process that it took from start to finish to, conception of the book to finishing the book. I mean the journey, and I mean the life's journey. I'm 43 years old. I'm married to an international award-winning architect, and felt like a lot of my life I was living in the passenger seat, right,
Yeah.
of his life, sort of lost in the roles of being a mother, being a wife. And women especially suffer with imposter syndrome more so because, for those of you who don't know what it means, it's when an individual doubts their skills and talents, and has a fear of being exposed as a fraud. Even the most highly trained people will tell you they feel this. And it really, it's interesting because no matter how much evidence you have otherwise, you just really struggle with, for me, I struggled with being in the driver's seat of my own story and my own life. And so when I went through some therapy myself, I realized that many of us don't set goals because we don't think we're worthy of them. And, for me, in my case, it was feeling scared of my own success versus my own failure, because I thought, what would that success look like within my family unit? What would be compromised with that? And like women like myself, we tend to identify with just being a wife or a woman and those roles that come along with it. So, and along those lines, it's easy to dream about what you want. But in between where you are and what you want, there's a tremendous amount of work and exploration and things that you have to work through to get there. So this book I'm very proud of it because it is the hardest thing that I've ever done, but it's the most that I've ever shown up for myself.
I really I really always feel like imposter syndrome doesn't get enough attention because it's really it can be huge in somebody's life. It could be like a huge roadblock. I know for me, I struggled with it for many years and didn't go after being a librarian until I was 50 because of that. And because I have had lifelong learning disabilities. So for me, it was a really big struggle. I know that many women struggle this because I see my own wife go through this with her writing, because like to the kids, she's just mom, right? So they're kind of coming at her with all the stuff they need. And then, just struggling at work and all the other things you have to do. Imposter syndrome can be really detrimental when you are trying to get off the ground as a writer. How does this all impact you when you started to try and write and be a blogger and then create your book? What were some of these roadblocks that you had? How did you kind of struggle with imposter syndrome?
I think that we all have a personal lie that's deep rooted within us, that we tell ourselves over and over again based on experiences that in our lives, mostly from our childhood. And for me, there's a couple, but it's that I tend to give up when something gets too hard because of what I was saying before. I'm afraid of my own success, that my light is going to be too bright for my family, because that means my success might take me away from them.
Yeah.
That my success might isolate me from friends who are maybe stuck and maybe are intimidated by my growth. And so I tended to take things to the point where they were about to become successful, or that I would feel like living to my fullest potential, and say, you know what, that's just too hard to take it to the next level. I had a natural products company also called Modern Hippie for every soul. And it started exploding locally and in shops, yoga shops, surf shops, boutiques, and I was selling them online. And then all of a sudden it got to the point where I would have to start mass manufacturing them, and which meant I would have to travel and interview, this was way before COVID, interview manufacturers. And I just said, it was like I was feeling suffocated. I was like, I give up. I can't do this. It's too hard. I don't want to do it. And, so that this book was something that was so hard to me to achieve, but something I wanted so badly, that I think the breaking point for me was when I think my kids went off to school. I have two teenagers, 18 and 14 now, but they started the year at school one fall. And I just remember sitting there thinking, it feels worse to me right now to be stuck on this couch feeling like I don't have a purpose than it does for me to go through all of the hard steps to make this dream happen. So it was worse to be stuck than the fear of actually going through all these motions to get where I was. And so when that fear outweighed the other, I said, I can't stand feeling stuck for one more day.
If you had any advice for men to help the women in their lives, to kind of empower them to kind of get past that roadblock, what would you give us as advice?
Wow, great question. Oh, I love this.
Well, I need it because
I
I'm just
really feel like the truest form of love is selfless love, where you support without any conditions. If you see that your wife has a passion or a dream, you really want to love her by letting her be her fullest self. And my husband was very supportive in the sense that he encouraged me. And then when I would come to him feeling guilty about the money that we were putting out for this, whenever he could sense that I was about to stop or quit or give up because it was just hard in that respect, he challenged me around that. He said, who's telling you that you're spending too much money, you or me? And who is telling you that you're not going to be as great of a mother, or that our table isn't going to be compromised, or is going to be compromised when you are cooking for the rest of the world? Who's telling you that, me, us, or you? So he really kind of encouraged me to talk things through like this at the table and really say, I love and support you. And no matter what you do, and no matter how much time it takes away, I love you, and we're here, and we love and support you. And that sort of broke any of the chains that I had built around what I was thinking was an issue, but really wasn't. So I would say that form of unconditional love and support is what a woman really needs, because she is her own worst critic.
Thank you for this, because as a man, I needed to hear this to kind of help support my wife in her creative endeavors. So thank you.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Where did the term modern hippie come from for you?
Modern hippie is a term that I use as laid back elegance. It's not, some woman walking around, half her body, with her hair in braids and the other half the leather skirt. Mm-hmm. It's not that. It's more of a lifestyle. You can be a good hostess and a good cook and not slave away in the kitchen all day.
Yeah.
You can create an elegant tablescape without expensive linens. And really the essence of modern hippie is that you can make people feel really good just by being present when you're in their presence. And so, kind of going back to a time when people weren't running in a million directions with travel sports, and just, back then, dinner was a very important meal. You can come home after school, go play with your friends in the neighborhood, but everyone needs to be home for dinner. And there was such an importance around that we have lost in this generation, and COVID sort of brought back to the forefront. So, the term modern hippie is just kind of a catchy, fun phrase for just really prioritizing family, and also for just kind of just taking a step back, creating more of those laid back atmospheres that make people feel special without feeling like you have to be stiff and have all this money and so much time.
Now, the book Modern Hippie Table is not just a cookbook, as we've already said. I think people could look at it and give it, oh, a cookbook, but like there's so much more than that. So I want to kind of talk about that a bit, because for me, it's important. Reading the book, there's a lot in there, and decorating and creating a comfortable space. There's a lot of stuff. Can we talk about that a little bit, what you put into the book outside of the recipes?
Yes, for sure. So one thing I learned from my husband is, I watch him create the designs for people in their homes. And he really he'll go to a piece of property with no house on it, no structure, nothing. And he'll go at different times of the day and even different seasons, and he'll get a different feel for the property or the home that he's, remodeling. And he really believes that a space has a life and a soul. And so he designs with this in mind. And I really kind of, related to that philosophy, because when people come into your home, I really want them to experience all of their senses without really even knowing that they are, but I want them to smell, I want them to see, I want them to hear, and just everything around them. When they come into my home, I take responsibility for my table, for how I am. Am I stressed? Am I cleaning? Am I running around my kitchen with ingredients and stuff everywhere? Or did I carefully plan a little bit ahead of time so that most of the meal or parts of the meal were cooked, so that when they come in, I have a cocktail ready? Or, I have thought about the table. And this goes for just my family too. I really am conscious of what I bring and the energy that I bring to the space and the table. And so creating comfortable atmospheres and where people feel romantic and special is just as important to me by what goes on the table.
There's a lot to unpack with this book, but I want to talk about one specific part that for me was an epiphany. That was like, it was one of those right place, right time kind of things. You talk about planning and how planning is so integral to creating events and creating times in your life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I think planning, people say, oh my God, plan. I don't have to plan one other thing in my life. And that's why they steer clear a lot of times of, making a recipe from a book, and they just kind of put on the table whatever's easy. I think planning is really just about being intentional. It's respecting yourself as the host, as much as it is respecting your guests. And all it's doing is saying, I knew you were coming, and I thought about you showing up. So I took a little bit of time into thinking about my recipe and thinking about how you felt when you came in to my house. And so that to me is like another form of respect. So that even if I'm making, let's say, that's why I love using recipes that are making a meal that has maybe something that roasted for a few hours, but then so then I'll make a more complicated side. For example, I'm not making complicated main with a complicated appetite or side. I just like to kind of be very conscious about what I have on my plate, literally and figuratively, because I just think that is the way that the host can also get the most out of it, so that you want to cook for your family and friends.
You have a lot of delicious and elegant recipes in this book. What was the process like? Was it hard for you to kind of pick a select amount of recipes for this book?
Hmm. It wasn't, in the sense that I had a binder of recipes that were just torn up, and over the years, clippings from magazines, inspiration. And I'm very much an organized person, and it wasn't working for me anymore. And my first step was, why don't I type this out so that it can be written neatly for my kids? And then, because I'm such a visual storyteller, it just started evolving into, I would take my own pictures of my own recipes or family recipes and put them in the binder with the recipe. And then I started offering tips, and I thought, wow, like this is a really special way to present something in a book form like this. And so I started taking the recipes that either my kids really loved, or that were family for generations, or some that I made up, and putting them all together. And I guess I chose, some have great stories behind them, like where in my travels I would eat somewhere and try to just recreate that taste in my kitchen, not knowing the recipes. And then others are just, a little bit of my mom mixed in with a little bit of my grandmother, and, my twist in that, and how recipes have ebbed and flowed and changed over the generations. So those are the ones I really chose for this book.
The Collective Book Studio in Oakland did a great job with this book. What was it like working with them on your first book during the quarantine, which must have added some challenges as well?
I had a great experience with them. I hadn't heard before about partnership publishing, and it's basically where you the author and the publisher are partners in the process. So you are you are fronting some of the cost, but you're also getting a greater percentage of the royalties, and you also have 90% of the creative freedom, which is amazing. They collaborated with me at every step of the way. I had the final say in everything. And when I caught their attention, I flew out to Oakland during the pandemic. I said, I have to meet with you to make sure I feel the energy and that this is the right fit. And it was. It's a woman-owned publisher. And her passion for what she does was very relatable to me, and we chose each other. And they just have blown me away with my with what they've done as far as my expectations. I mean, their editorial team, their design team, it's just been incredible. I've enjoyed it so much.
The photography for the book by Christy Hort was fantastic. Did you have a hand in the photography? Were you able to kind of direct it?
For sure. And that's a funny story, because I wrote this book completely backwards. I had no idea how to write a book. People say, well, how did you know? I didn't. I had no idea. So I went, and there was a photographer that lives in my neighborhood. He's a fashion photographer. I said, do you know anybody in the industry in South Florida who shoots food and lifestyle? Oh yeah, let me give you this person's number. So he did. I interviewed 3 people. I chose one. That person gave me the name of a food stylist. Next thing you know, a month later, they show up at my house. I had a whole concept book of what I wanted my book to look like. And I actually shot the photos before I even wrote the manuscript.
Oh, wow.
Before I even picked out all the recipes. And it was so backwards that I didn't realize it. But the beauty of life is this: if you don't know how to do something, do it anyway. Because if you are going with and following your passion the right way, there is no right way. The only reason I got recognized by my publisher when I was turned down so many times with my book proposal from other publishers is because once I had all these images which told that story without even words, that caught the eye of this publisher. And they said, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. Like, what's your story? And then I started putting that into words and writing about it. And that backwards approach ended up being the best thing I ever did. So I think that's a funny and cool part of the story. And the team that I had in my house shooting, Christy Horse, and Frankie Chacon, we worked together, and they said it was one of the best projects they had ever done, because for 3 weeks in my home, we were cooking and designing and creating and photographing, and they became like a family. And so when they caught what my essence was and what my goals were, they had a lot of fun with me doing this.
Circling back to imposter syndrome, what was it like holding the first galley proof of the book in your hands?
Funny enough, when I received the first hand-bound copy, I was emotionless, and it really struck me. I said, well, aren't I supposed to cry or like be super proud? Like, how am I supposed to be right now? Because I'm really not feeling anything. And once I processed that with my husband, it was sort of a delayed reaction of I just wasn't allowing myself to believe that I had truly created this, that it wasn't real. And it wasn't until really like after kind of reviews started coming in, and I'm not talking about just like, from forward reviews or influencers or people in the industry, but also too like my family and my kids and the people who saw me working hard on this. It's sort of like they gave me permission to say, Mom, this is incredible, or look what you created. And then my daughter said, Mom, on my college application, I wrote that my dad's an architect, and now I can say my mom's an author. And that just like the floodgates opened, and the emotion came out of me that, oh my gosh, that yes, that's who I am. I am a published author. And from that point on, I felt, okay, I need to really feel this, because you can never write your first book again.
Now, I want to ask too, who are some of your favorite cooking and lifestyle authors that you like to read?
Okay, so published, I think there's I've always really, one of the more famous ones is Giada. Giada was the first one to me who came out with like a lifestyle book 10 plus years ago, lifestyle cookbook, where she had nuggets and tidbits between the chapters of what was in her purse, tips on how to eat out. How did she eat when she traveled? What did she pack? What did she do on the plane? And I really was so much more drawn to those tidbits in the book than I was even some of the recipes. And I thought, wow, she just gave people permission to talk about the process. It's like Laird Hamilton's a famous surfer, and everyone loves to watch him surf, but I really want to know, and people want to know, what do you eat for breakfast? What is your fuel? People want to know what my husband is, how he draws, more than they want to see the finished rendering of their house. It's like, oh, wow, let me see you draw, right? So, yeah, the process behind how that's all done is just equally as important. And yeah.
Now, I got to ask, I'd be really surprised if Home and Garden Network and other channels aren't beating down a path to your door. Are you anybody kind of pitching TV ideas to you yet?
So I've just been doing a lot of a combination of live and live, but in studio and in my own kitchen. So I think I'm kind of just getting used to the TV aspect of it all.
Would you want to do that if they were offered?
Yeah, it's a good question. I enjoy being live in person more than I do in a studio. So I would enjoy interacting with other people, feeding off other people's energy more so than I'm in a kitchen showing and demoing. I like that too, but I would be more interested in sort of a collaboration with my husband where we are, because we're just such a creative duo that feed off of each other, and I'm really proud of that, and I love we process a lot together.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I would want to see that. That sounds great.
Oh, great. I just want to say, getting back to, I diverted a little bit as far as influences. There are so many. No, I diverted. There are so many people right now on social media who don't have published cookbooks, who maybe are thinking about it, but the content that people are creating right now is just unbelievable. It's like when Pixar came to the cartoon world, right? It's like Instagram and Reels and TikTok are making this. A lot of these bloggers and people are influencing me and how I am showing and teaching and creating. So there's a lot of influence from that. I think there's a huge trend towards that social media world, which a lot of people push and resist against, but it's just the next season of cooking and creating. And so I would have to say that a lot of my influences are just people like me who are at home and who aren't famous, living their life and showing. And that's what I love about, writing Modern Hippie, is I just wanted it to be fun and relatable for the average woman at home who is, most of her entertaining are small gatherings.
Do you have any favorite vloggers?
Yes, I love Half Baked Harvest on Instagram.
Yes.
Easy allergy-free recipes, Kayla Capiello. She's actually publishing a book right now. She is wonderful and great. Foods of Jane. She's just a great. All these people are great recipe developers and content creators, and I really look up to their just the way that they're showing what they're creating. And I'm trying to think of lifestyle. I'm not so into, in fact, I'm a little turned off by people who try on clothes and, I'm just, there's not so much of an organicness to that. I love watching what people are cooking in and saying, I want that.
Yeah.
And so the more relatable bloggers are the ones that I am most impressed with or influenced by.
Now, I know this is an unfair question because you're on tour for your first book, but what's next for you?
Ooh, it's not unfair. What the vision with this was, this is a cookbook by genre, but it's more a lifestyle. And for me, the vision was a series of lifestyle books that started with the table and the kitchen. The next one that I had in my vision was the Modern Hippie Traveler. And that is one that documents our travels and our bowless road chief camper, which is like a silver bullet style tow behind camper that we travel throughout the country, and we leave it somewhere and fly home and then fly back and drive it some more. And I love creating recipes, campfire recipes, and cooking in very small spaces. So that was actually slated to be my next book, but I've had so much fun in the food and entertaining aspect of all of this that I'm sort of talking with my publisher about like shifting a little bit and doing more of a board focused book, food board and design.
Oh,
Which has,
nice.
like, truly been part of my passion, but different, unique, not just this new trend of butter board kind of thing. I'm not talking about the trend. I'm talking about beautiful, entertaining concepts, combining very interesting ingredients and concepts, like serving cocktails and adult finger foods, meaning I say adult finger foods and it sounds naughty, but it's like, for example, like little, ooey gooey grilled cheese bites with Manhattan shots on a board or something, just different ways of, because now I just got invited to something next week in my neighborhood called a board party. And I thought, oh my gosh, like so up my alley. And all of these people were commenting what they were going to bring on a board. And one was a bruschetta board, and one was a donut board, and one was a pizza board. And so it's kind of taking like food, serving and entertaining and like in a pop art kind of a way and making it aesthetically pleasing. And I really can see that vision for my next book now.
That sounds wonderful. I'm looking forward to that already. Please do that. Yeah, thank you so much. I really want to thank you, Lauren, for being on the podcast and also for the insights you gave me today. I feel like I got a great twofer, so thank you.
Oh my gosh, you asked such important questions, and you are doing such a beautiful thing by asking these questions, and by from a male perspective, how do I help empower my wife or my significant other, because that makes for the best relationships, right? When you can both be living your truest and best life and supporting each other, that's a beautiful thing. So thank you for asking that.
Well, I don't want to downplay it. You may have saved my marriage, so thank you.
Well, you know what? This book pretty much saved mine. So
very nice. Lauren, thank you for being on the podcast. I look forward to seeing more from you, and I hope we can have you on the podcast again.
Thank you. I will look forward to that.